All right, folks, welcome back to Mars, Atlantis, and the Hollow Earth, Part 8, or to be more specific, Part 8.1. This is the home stretch. This will wrap up the series. Hope you've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed making the series, and we might go back to David Icke in the future. Can't think of a reason why not. But we'll round off this series, and then we'll round off Commons Beaumont, and then we'll head on to when Scotland was Jewish. So let's just get right into it. Yeah, don't need to say that. Disclaimer. Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Next slide. So once again, we're going back to Children of the Matrix by David Icke. The Curse of Ham in Canaan. According to the book of Genesis, Noah got seriously drunk on wine and collapsed in his tent. Ham, his son, walked in and saw his father naked. He told his two brothers before finding a cover for his father, and when Noah found out, he launched into a rage and put a curse on Ham and his son Canaan. Could the big deal here be that Ham saw something about Noah's body that indicated he was a child of the gods? By the time of Noah, before the cataclysm, humans were rebelling against the control of the Anunnaki Nephilim. This theme of hybrids can be seen in the story of Adam and Eve. In Jewish lore, Eve, who was tempted by the serpent as the ancestral mother of the Nephilim, Satan. Forbidden fruit. So the biblical Adam and Eve were probably hybrid genetic streams. At first, the interbreeding produced a very reptilian offspring. Thus, God, or the gods, made man in his or their image. This is where the otherwise unexplainable influence to, quote, let us make man in our image comes from. Adam and the Eve could not reproduce. They could not create enough worker slaves. Eventually, the human slaves were given the ability to procreate, and this involved an infusion of far more mammalian genes. Sex between their creations was the forbidden fruit in the Haggadah. I think that's how you say it. It says, quote, before their bodies had been overlaid with a horny skin and enveloped with a cloud of glory. No sooner had they violated the command given them than that the cloud of glory and the horny skin dropped from them, and they stood there in their nakedness and ashamed. Makes you think about the expressions like "I'm horny," right? That just sprung to mind there. Not saying that I personally am. I'm just saying, if you're up for it, as it were, if you're up for doing the job, what is it you say? You say, "I'm horny," or "I'm really horny," and then you read this and you think, "Hmm, something there, all right." But interesting as well, the infusion of mammalian genes and talking about horny skin and all this. Humans are kind of this mixture of mammalian and reptilian. It's interesting. I remember one of my favorite movies, Lord of War. There's a great quote by Nicolas Cage. He says, "At 4.5 months old, the human fetus has a tail." That's an actual quote from the movie. Makes you think when you bear all this in mind. So, a horrific war, the Indians versus the Atlanteans. The story of the battle between Zu and Nanurta describes the use of high-tech weaponry. At Rajasthan, I think that's how you say it, in India, radioactive ash covers 3 square miles. This is an area of high rates of cancer and birth defects, and it was cordoned off by the Indian government. An ancient city was unearthed, which was destroyed by an atomic explosion some 8,000 to 12,000 years ago. And people are still getting sick? Must have been a hell of a weapon. 500,000 people could have died in the blast. The Mahabharata, by the way, I'm proud of the fact that I can pronounce that, epic tells of, quote, a single projectile charged with all the power of the universe, flame as bright as 10,000 suns. It was an unknown weapon, an iron thunderbolt which reduced to ashes an entire race. Well, it's not unknown to us, talking about nuclear weapons. It talks of a horrific war between the Indian peoples and the Atlanteans. The reptilians and the Nordics fought ancient battles on the moon and Mars as well as Earth. We'll be getting back to the moon and Mars in the future as well, but for the time being, we might remain a bit more grounded. I've got to think about what I'm going to do after when Scotland was Jewish because I want to go back to Mars and the Moon. I did change the name of the channel to Cosmic Apocrypha because I want to go back to that stuff, the Moon and Mars and all that, and Hollow Earth. There's so much to explore there. But there's another good author called Charles Coss, and he wrote a book called Confession of the Gods, which talks about exactly this. I would recommend getting that book. Get it on Amazon. It's called Confessions of the Gods by the author Charles Coss. He goes into great detail about exactly this. An evil wind. Well, they don't have much more evil. But when the Anunnaki returned, the same mentality returned. The evidence shows that there were more nuclear holocausts. Archaeological discoveries in the Indus Valley shows that cities were built there between 3500 and 3000 BC, and they were destroyed about 2000 BC. Skeletons found at these sites record high rates of radioactivity. Sumer came to an end with an evil wind. Texts known as Lamentations tell of a calamity that befell Sumer. There was an evil wind, a battling storm, and a scorching heat. Some kind of cloud shut out the sun. The texts continue. The people, terrified, could hardly breathe. The evil wind clutched them, does not grant them another day. It causes cities to be desolated. Even the gods had to evacuate. It also corresponds with Sodom and Gomorrah. And there you got the nuclear explosions of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. They're there on the right hand side. We know exactly what they're talking about. Blackened stones, the Sinai Peninsula. So many sources point to these cities being located in what is now the southern end of the Dead Sea. That's legit, by the way. I looked it up on Google Earth, where radioactivity persists. For thousands of years, it has been associated with the symbol of death. The accounts of the devastation of Sodom and Gomorrah describe how God decided to destroy these cities and warned his friends to get out. There is an enormous scar in the landscape. There is, by the way, if you look it up, of the Sinai Peninsula, which covers 112 square miles. Blackened stones can be found over a large section of the eastern Sinai. However, the scenes of these apparent nuclear explosions are to the west of Sumer. And in the Sumerian Lamentations, we are told that the evil wind brought that civilization to an immediate conclusion in a flash of lightning and spawned in the west. Uther Pendragon. So French stories from the Alpine region speak of a dragon with a blood-red ruby eye in the center of the forehead that seemed to be projecting fire. Sometimes this middle eye is called Dracotia. Did I say that right? Dracontia. Yeah, I think so. And the eye, the evil eye, the Cyclops as well, springs to mind. Yep, said that the ancient stories of the Cyclops may well relate to this. The kings in the reptilian bloodlines were known as dragons. The Celtic title of Pendragon, as in Uther Pendragon, was a version of this. The red dragon, symbol of Wales, comes from the claim by Merlin that the red dragon symbolized the people of Britain. There's also the theory, by the way, that the lion rampant and the leopards, by the way, the three lions on England's flag is meant to actually be three leopards, but there is a theory that the lion rampant of Scotland and the three leopards of England are also dragons, red dragons at that. The Arthurian stories include all the classic elements of interbreeding between humans and non-human entities and between competing dragons. Yeah, you know how you got the England song, Three Lions on a Shirt. It's actually three leopards. But also when they were describing, and this almost escaped my notice, but it didn't quite. King Edward I Longshanks was described as being capricious. He would flip between a leopard and a lion. That's how he was actually described. That's some of the words I think that were used even by Henry the Minstrel. He would flip between a lion and a leopard. Makes you think, doesn't it? When you look a little bit deeper. So like I say, you got the the red dragon on all three flags potentially: Wales, Scotland, and England. The red lion, the lion rampant, looks a bit like a dragon. The three leopards or three lions in England shirt, by the way, it is leopards if you look it up. They're potentially also dragons. Yeah. Three lines on a shirt. You mean leopards? But anyway, serpents, the seraphim. There is also the theme of the quote Lady of the Lake, and this connects with the stories of goddess worshipping serpent people in the Nagas living in underground lakes and lochs. All over the ancient world, you find the same recurring stories. Throughout the Sumer Empire, the people worshipped serpent gods. In Hebrew myth, the biblical Nephilim means serpents. Hebrew legends also describe the Eden serpent as a being who walked and talked like a human. The Haggadah speaks of the serpent as a creature with two legs that stood upright. The Slavonic Apocalypse of Abraham. What a fucking name for a book, by the way. That's a great title. Anyway, the Slavonic Apocalypse of Abraham says the serpent with Eve had hands, feet, and wings. The name seraphim means serpent. Flying angels are symbolic of the reptilians. Belial, the prince of darkness. This is also symbolized in gargoyle figures. Seraph in the King James Version of the Bible is translated as fiery serpent and would seem to derive from the same root as the Sumerian Seru, the name of a serpent in the Epic of Gilgamesh, which I've read, by the way, and Sarpa, a Sanskrit term for Nagas. The Jewish Talmud forbids the depiction of the dragon. A fragment of the Hebrew Dead Sea Scrolls includes a description of a watcher known as Belial. It calls him the Prince of Darkness, with a visage like a viper. Interestingly, one of the key colleges at Oxford University is named after John Balliol, who was married to a Scottish princess, Dervogulia of Galloway. Their son was King of Scots from 1292 to 1296. I bet Jed would have a field day with that, by the way. But yeah, the whole Balliol thing, you know. But anyway, that's getting sidetracked into Scottish history, but interesting, isn't it? And by the way, you see gargoyles all over the place when you go to Scottish cities. Like if you go to Stirling Castle, you see gargoyles. I don't know if you see, yeah, you do see them at Edinburgh Castle. You see them on the side of the Scott Monument on Princess Street. You even see them on the side of the former Armenian restaurant near Holyrood Palace. You see gargoyles all over many buildings in Scottish cities and like castles and things like that. And the Scott Monument had gargoyles on it, and even an Armenian restaurant, which used to be a police station. It's the red sandstone building down by the bridge, down at the bottom of Abbey Hill or Abbey Bray as you head towards Holyrood Palace. So, yeah. So, connected by legends, the Chinese calendar zodiac dating to 2500 BC is symbolized by animals, all of which still exist except for one, the dragon. The ancient Chinese believed that a dragon fathered the first dynasty of divine emperors, and subsequently emperors. Their thrones, boats, and beds were designed with dragon symbolism. James Churchward claimed that the ancient tablets he examined from an Indian monastery revealed that the Nagas had populated China, Tibet, and a significant part of Asia. Among the descendants of these bloodlines were the fair-skinned Aryans. As a serpent colony, you would expect to find pyramids in China. References to them have been found dating back 5,000 years. Yeah, there are pyramids in China, but they're all kind of sealed off. And anyway, that's subject for another time. Dinosaur fossils. The secret society initiate Georges Ivanovich Gurd. How do you say this? Gurdjieff. Oh, I don't know how you say it. Said that he had been part of an unsuccessful expedition to find the lost city of the Uyghur Empire under the Gobi Desert. He said he was initiated into the Sun Moon Brotherhood of Central Asia, and this brotherhood had come from Mars. Guess who's not surprised? And yeah, sorry, I said that. James Churchward says the Ugar Empire were Lemurians. Later, a Russian archaeologist, Professor Koslov, for some reason that name sounds familiar, found a tomb of ancient artifacts in the Gobi Desert. An expedition by the American Museum in 1993 found a mysteriously large number of dinosaur fossils in the Gobi Desert. They found 40 to 50 dinosaur skeletons. A race of extraterrestrials called the Kumaras established a mystery school on Lemuria Mu and later Mongolia, the Gobi Desert. It's Zamna. So the Chinese name for the ley lines is dragon lines. We'll get into that in the future. Ley lines and dragon lines and all that. Loads of books on that. In fact, we'll get back to Gary Biltcliffe's book, which I started in the past and then kind of forgot about. Apologies about that, by the way, but we'll get back to that. The Spine of Albion, where you got the two dragon lines which go right throughout the length of the British Isles. You got a male dragon line and you got a female dragon line, and they intersect and weave almost like a DNA strand. Very, very interesting. But again, that's subject for another time. So the dragon lines. So an ancient Chinese tale about the dragon kings also makes a clear reference to shape shifting. A character called Lu Yi was said to have seen the palace of the emperor change before his eyes. The palace of the emperor, okay. And the courtiers dissolve and then return to their original form. The first settlers of the Yucatan, they were said to have come across the sea led by a god figure called Itzamna, the sacred city of the god, quote, the place of the lizard. Quetzalcoatl also carried a Tau cross. Itzamna was the Central American god who breathed life into man, half human, half reptile. And that's interesting, the Tau cross. We'll get into that when we get into the new series coming within the next few weeks when Scotland was Jewish talks about the Tau cross a few times, interestingly. So worship of the serpent, Quetzalcoatl, the quote feathered serpent, was the major deity of this culture. Aztec myth says that Quetzalcoatl created humans with help from the serpent woman. I don't know how you pronounce this. Chihuahuacotl, I think, maybe. Chihuahuacotl. I'm just going with that. Edward Thompson, the American archaeologist, was initiated into the Mayan Brotherhood of Chatal, and he was told that the port city of Tamonchan in Veracruz, Mexico, means, quote, the place where the people of the serpent landed. They came in boats, which, quote, shone like the scales of serpent skins, and they were, quote, clad in strange garments and wore about their foreheads emblems like entwined serpents. Another landing point for the, quote, serpent Atlanteans was Valum Votan. Here, Pakal Votan and his entourage came ashore. The center of its geographic landmass as is the Great Pyramid at Giza. The Olmec peoples of Central America based their whole culture on worship of the serpent. The Hopi and the Navajo. In Ohio, there is a mysterious and unexplained mound shaped like a serpent. The Hopi Indians in Arizona have their plumed serpent god, Baholinking. Oh, I have no idea how you say this. Baholinkinga, I think maybe. They talk of an underground world, Hollow Earth, they called Sipapuni, where they originated. They say that within the earth they were led by the ant people, and they refer to their ancestors as snake brothers. These descriptions sound like beings described in the Sumerian accounts. This is very much like the dance rituals performed by Mayans in Mexico. The Hopis believe they share the same ancestors as the Chimu people of Peru, Lemurians. Well, no doubt about it in my mind, of course they do. Their priests would make snake hissing sounds and chant snake mantras to invoke their serpent gods. Significantly, the region where you find the Hopi and Navajo lands in Arizona, Utah, the site of a major underground reptilian base. The Hopi snake clan claims its origins under the earth. reptilian imagery. He said his tribe was named after a boy called Apache who killed the great dragon. The story has the feel of George, yeah, defeating the dragon. This is a universal story. It's all over the world when you look into it. Quotes, according to the descendants of the early Lemurian record keepers, American or America even, was anciently known as Amaraka, the quote, land of wise serpents. The title Amaraka is derived from Amaru, meaning snake or serpents. H.P. Blavatsky maintains in The Secret Doctrine that America is referred to in the Hindu Puranas as Potala, the kingdom of the Nagas, of the serpents. Quote, some of the former Lemurian and Atlantean peoples migrated northwards to become Native American tribes. Native American culture in general is awash with reptilian imagery. Well, I would say what culture is not, when you really look into it, and includes many tales of the sky gods coming down to breed with their women. Yeah, it's not just the Native Americans, it's every culture has it, when you really look into it. I mean, even the Norse, the Viking culture, think everything, the Celtic culture, every culture in the world, if you go back, you'll see this. It comes up time and time and time and time and time again, every single time. You can go anywhere. This is universal. Not to take anything away from Native American culture, but I'm just saying it's all over the world. So the Mescalero Apaches crown dance. So as a Delugio, the Mescalero Apache chief, told her that the ancestors of the Apaches were serpents from their sunken homeland in the Arctic. Again, the whole idea of the sacred north. After Hyperborea, after being forced by conflict to leave Peru, they traveled north where they fought with local tribespeople in North America. Of course, any tribes that are migrating are going to run into problems like that, I would imagine. Back in those days, their men were killed, and the women went on to breed with the victors to form the bloodlines that became the Mescalero Apaches. Hansen identified significant connections between the Apaches and the peoples of North Africa. See what I mean? It's universal, who also claimed descent from Atlantis. The Mescalero Apache crown dance is performed with serpents pointed or painted even all over the bodies of the participants. The chief wears a 13-pointed crown votan. The Sioux tribe insists that their ancestors were from Atlantis via Peru, and again, the serpent imagery is extremely prominent. Yep, you can believe it. The Lakota and the Sioux. So the Sioux ancient records say that after the demise of Atlantis, their ancestors, who they call the Turtles, traveled to the Caribbean islands and went on to South America before heading north. They say these turtle people became known as the Lakota and the Sioux, or snakes. This story is apparently symbolized at the mysterious Serpent Mound in Ohio. The original structure was vast, covering 14 acres and rising to 100 feet. A Sioux chief called Shooting Star said during a visit to Peru, quote, "This is the land of our beginning, where we went from the old red land even before it sank, because this land is as old as the dragon land of the fire god," which is Votan, which was Atlantis. Other Native American tribe say they descended from Atlanteans or Lemurians who fled from the sunken lands. Oklahoma means sun people of the red land. Lucille Taylor Hanson collected Native American legends which say that some tribes came from Atlantis under the leadership of the prince grandson of Votan. Of course. What did I just say? Serpent fire. So Prince Votan's arrival in North America was celebrated with an annual ceremony known as Thanksgiving, later stolen by the European pilgrims. I've never heard this before. People think that the European pilgrims created this, but apparently not. Apparently it already existed, maybe in a previous form. Yeah, so an annual ceremony known as Thanksgiving, stolen by the pilgrims. A key area for Illuminati rituals is Mount Shasta in Northern California, the center of many legends about serpents and Lemurians settling before and after the cataclysm. They were obsessed with building structures on the vortex points. Again, ley lines, dragon lines. We'll get into all of this. Some 40,000, bloody hell, 40,000 stone circles, pyramids, and mounds were built in North America. I'd say that's probably a low estimate, probably more than that. That's just what's known. Burning flames were often placed on the top of the mounds. You mean like the Olympic torch, for example? Uh, these were the symbol of, quote, the serpent fire of Atlantis. The Native American tribes formed secret societies or serpent clans and the Thunderbird clans. Author Mark Amaru Pinkham writes of these clans, quote, they were reputed to wield the lethal power of a live snake. Snake initiates would often adorn their body with snakeskins. And interestingly, Beaumont makes the correlation that serpents or snakes meant firearms. And then you've got Votan, who's the god of fire. You just extend that slightly. Firearms, you mean? You know, uh, Beaumont's, of course, very different from David Icke. Their interpretations would probably be very different as well. I think Beaumont's interpretation of the serpent rod or the serpent meaning firearms is, you know, possibly got some validity to it, but I think Icke's interpretation is far more literal, that it's like genetic reptilian DNA, actually. Maybe they're both right. I mean, who knows? This is why I present both sides. It's up to you to form your own conclusions. But up on the top right there, we've got the ultimate serpent, Palpatine, the Dark Lord of the Sith. I'm sure I'm not spoiling that. Everyone and their mothers has seen Star Wars by now. And he's present at the burning of Qui-Gon Jinn, his funeral pyre. This is how the Jedi, well, they don't bury their dead. They cremate their dead, and you got the arch serpent there. You know, Darth Sidious, Palpatine, the future Emperor. Watching on this funeral mound. I always think it's interesting to watch these movies like Star Wars with educated eyes when you know what you're looking at, because there isn't a story you know, like Lord of the Rings, like Star Wars, or any of the others, like Game of Thrones, that's not, just an enhanced version, an up to date, modernized version of these old myths and legends. So watch movies like that again with open eyes, with educated eyes, and see what you pick up on. And down on the bottom right, you got the feathered serpent. So that's maybe a good place to leave off for part one. I don't want to go on too long. Thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, leave your thoughts and comments down below.